Marley Bird, and in this video I will show you how to create the Bernat Lacy Crochet Shawl. This shawl uses 4 balls of Bernat Super Value Big Stripes yarn and really packs a beautiful punch as you wrap it around your neck or shoulders. This is an intermediate level shawl, but don't let that scare you. With my guidance and as we go over the stitches that are used in the pattern, you should be able to complete this shawl in no time. To follow along with the video, go ahead and grab that free pattern available at yarnspirations.com. I've put a link in the video description box right down there below, or you can click that little I button right there. Once you have your pattern and your materials, you can join me right here in the video, getting started with the very first chain stitches. Let's jump in. As with any new pattern, you should always read through the instructions to see if there's something you don't understand. Specifically, read through the abbreviations and make sure that you understand what all of the abbreviations mean. That way, as you find those abbreviated words or instructions in the written format, you can quickly identify what it is you're expected to do. Right off the bat, I can see right here, I'm like, what is an HDCFP? Well, I know that an HDC is a half double crochet, and I know that an FP usually means front post. So this would be my guess. It's a half double crochet front post. And then it walks you through how to complete that. As you're looking through this, you might say, what is a YOH? Well, let's see. Do they have it over here? Ah, YOH, yarn over hook. Pretty simple stuff. The other thing I always look for in the pattern are the designer notes. Now, looking at the Yarnspirations pattern here, they don't have a specific section broken out for notes, but you can see right here that they have a note written right underneath the word instructions, and it lets you know clearly that the chain 2 at the beginning of the row does not count as a half double crochet. So as we are working these stitches, we will not count that chain 2 as a half double crochet. And it also says move marker up each row to center chain 2 space. Well, that lets you know immediately that you will be required to use some removable stitch markers, which is great. Those of you who have followed along with my videos know I love stitch markers. I think they are incredibly handy to help you keep track of where you are in this pattern. The last thing I always look for in the pattern is what type of instructions is it that I'm getting? Am I just getting written instructions, or is there a chart or a diagram available? For this particular pattern, as you've already seen, we do have the written instructions, okay? So we have all of the written instructions, which seem pretty dense, okay? So it's pretty dense instructions, and it obviously is right here. It says the 14th to the 20th row, even rows, work as the second row. So the second row right up here. So those are going to be the same. And then we have 15, 17, 19, 21, 22, it says work the same as the 12th row, so right here. And then 23, it says as the 13th row, so right here. And then 24th is the second row, so right here. Then it says repeat the 15th to the 22nd rows once more. So that means I will go back here to row 15 and all the way to the row 22, so that would be to right here. And it says once more, noting the repeat in this the brackets 5 times. So that just lets you know that as your piece grows larger, your repeat in those brackets, it's going to increase because you'll have more stitches to be working across. But essentially, once you get through the first 24 rows, the first 24 rows, you will then just go back and repeat rows 15 through 22 to complete the shawl. Pretty convenient. That makes it pretty easy. However, as I mentioned, is there a crochet diagram or a crochet chart? So let's turn the page. We can see here that, we have more instructions. So once you repeat through 22, you're also supposed to do 23 and 24 once more. And then obviously you are increasing your number of actual stitch repeats across the row. And then your final row is right here. So those are the written instructions. As we're looking at the stitch diagram or the stitch chart, man, I love these. These are always these are a make or break for me anymore because I'm looking at words and I always will jumble the words. I lose my place and I have a very hard time. Whereas if I'm looking at a stitch diagram, I can easily see exactly how my stitches are supposed to be placed as they work along the row. The hardest part when you're looking at a stitch diagram like this is that there are a lot of stitches between like the big action stitches. And I'm going to call those like these double treble stitches that are all placed into one stitch. Can you see all of those double trebles all placed into one stitch? And then we have all of these stitches here that are spaced out between this double treble cluster. It's not actually a cluster, but it's a double treble section. This double treble section, this one. So we have all of those stitches. The hardest part for me is making sure I am on track with the number of stitches that I have to do. So it's very, very important that as I look at a stitch pattern like this is where I will take the time and I will grab a colored pen or marker. And then I will go to my stitch diagram and working from the side where I'm supposed to be working across the row, okay? So after my foundation row is worked this direction, I'm going to read my chart in this direction. And I would start over here and I would start making notes. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, oh no, I just skipped up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5. I can go ahead and mark that 5 there since I already counted it. And now I can say, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 6. Let's count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 double trebles all worked into that one stitch. So I would put the number 6 there. Okay. Then I can see in the next stitch over, I have a double treble and then I have a skipped stitch. And then I have a double treble and I have a skipped stitch. So I can see there that it's a pattern. I have a double treble and a skipped stitch. But how many of those do I have? So I will look here and I'll say, okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I see a double treble here, but notice there's not a skip stitch next to it. So out of all of these double trebles and a skip stitch, I know I have 8. So I'm just going to put the number 8 there. Then after we do that skip stitch, I know I have 1 double treble right here. So I'm just going to put the number 1. Then I can see I have all of these double trebles into that one stitch. So I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll put the number 5. In the next stitch over, I can see I have a double treble, chain 2, and a double treble. I'm just going to leave that one be because I can see what that is right there without any trouble. But now I'm going to work back this way. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again, all worked in that one stitch. The next stitch over, I have a double treble and then a skipped stitch. Again, this is my repeat, right? So let's see how many of those. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then this is my double treble that doesn't have a skip stitch next to it. So I'm going to put my number 8 right here. My number 1 right there because that's just 1 double treble into that stitch. Now I'm in the last stitch of my foundation row. Remember, these chain 2s do not count as a stitch. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 double trebles worked into that row. Now you might be thinking, okay, why do I have 7 over here and only 5 over here? Well, if you remember in the designer note, it mentioned that these chain 2s don't count as a stitch. It made no mention of these chain 5s, and that's because these chain 5s, they count as a double treble. So this total right here, including these chain 5s, would give me my 7. So that way both sides of my piece are symmetrical. Make sense so far? Now, I will typically only do this row for row as I get to that row. It really helps as I'm picking up my yarn and my hook after I've just counted those stitches on my chart to go back then and immediately start crocheting those stitches. It's just something about the relationship of those being done side by side really helps out. So let's go ahead. Let's grab our yarn and our hook. I'm using a bigger hook and a bigger yarn today to hopefully let it show up better on camera, but you use the correct size hook and yarn for your project. Let's get started by chaining 41. I have gone ahead and chained 41 chains here, and that is just a discoloration of the yarn. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but it's not it's not a stain. It's from the yarn. And I can tell from my stitch diagram that I need to do a half double crochet in the third chain from hook. So I yarn over my hook, go down here to the third chain, insert my hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. Okay. Now I will yarn over and draw through all 3 loops on my hook. I know that this initial 2 chains here that I skipped, they are not going to count as a stitch. But this V right here behind the loop that's on my hook, can you see that V? I'm going to put this through it so maybe you can see. You see that V? That is the top of my stitch when I come back down to this end. So I am going to place a stitch marker right there just so that I know where the last stitch is when I come back down for my row 1, because this is foundation row, okay? The whole rest of this row is just half double crochets all the way down. We don't do any sort of shaping. So I want to make sure as I'm working down this row, I'm putting a half double crochet into each chain until I get all the way to the end. You will become very familiar with the half double crochet process because all of the wrong side rows, for the most part, are half double crochets, but they are also worked around the post of the stitch. And that's how you get that really cool sort of lip on this shawl that makes it very textural and very pretty. When you get to the last stitch of the row, we are going to pause, and I know that in the written instructions it tells me that I need to use a stitch marker, and I need to place a stitch marker in the 20th half double crochet for the center. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to count this first one. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So this is my 20th stitch. Okay, so that should be the center point of my project. It looks like it is right there. Fantastic. So that is helpful to know from the written instructions. It is at this point that we are going to turn our work and begin the right side row. And this is where we will be working the double trebles. When you're looking at the chart and you're dealing with different types of stitches that you might not recognize what they are, here is a quick tip. A very convenient thing about crochet symbols is that these little hash marks right here along the post of what looks like a big T, those hash marks give you a clue of how many times you should wrap your yarn over your hook before you insert your hook to begin a stitch. So if this were a double crochet, it would be the T and then 1 hash mark because we wrap it over our hook once. If it was a treble, we would have a T and then 2 hash marks. But we are working with a double treble, so we have the T and we have 3 hash marks. So that lets us know that when we create these double treble stitches that we are creating whenever we're on the right side of our fabric, conveniently in the chart they're all in blue, we know that we will wrap the yarn around our hook 3 times before we complete that stitch. Before we insert our hook to complete that stitch. All right, so that's really going to give us a lot of bang for our buck as we're working along this shawl. We're going to get a lot of length happening with each row as we complete it. And then on the following wrong side rows, that's when we will do those half double crochets around the post. And so we get kind of a squattier stitch there, but it gives us that really cool sort of lip on the front of the fabric. All right, so let's do row 1. Row 1 has us begin with that chain 5. 3, 4, 5, and I want to remind you this chain 5 does count as a stitch. So I will grab a marker And in that V behind the loop on my hook, I am going to place a marker. Now you can chain 5 and turn, or turn and chain 5. It really doesn't matter, but we have that chain 5 and it is going to count as a stitch. So I am placing my marker there. That way I know where the stitch is that I need to work into as I get down here to the end of the row. It always helps me out immensely. All right, so now I'm going to do my double treble. So I yarn over my hook 3 times, and working into this first stitch right here at the beginning, I will work 6 double trebles. And remember, I counted that on my chart to make it easier for me so that I don't have to pause and go back and count later on. I've already done that. So that was 1. And all of these are going to go into that 1 stitch. It's important to place all of these here at the edge because that allows our shawl to grow. You can't just let the shawl grow in the center point. It's got to grow at the wingspan also to let it get to the correct shape. And then as you're working these double trebles off the hook, it's just like any other crochet stitch for the most part. You yarn over and pull through 2 stitches along the way. All right. It's weird working with such large yarn and a large hook here, but I really feel like it would help you see how the stitches are made and how this begins to work up on itself. Okay, so if you ever lose count, you can pause here. I always like to count the post of the stitches. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need 1 more. All right, so there we go. Now I'm at the part of my chart where I have that double treble into the next stitch, and then I skip a stitch, and I'm going to do that a total of 8 times. So I yarn over my hook 3 times to prep for my double treble. I don't skip a stitch to start. I skip that after I complete the double treble. So I'll put a double treble into the next stitch over. If you notice, I grab the actual post of the stitch as I'm pulling the yarn through. It helps keep that stitch nice and consistent with the other stitches. I don't let it get overstretched. I'm not going to chain or anything else as I'm skipping this stitch. I'm just going right over here. This is going to create the wave of the pattern that we want. Okay, so we've done all of these increases here. This is essentially a series of decreases by skipping a stitch. So this 1 double treble, skip a stitch. This will be my 2nd double treble. Pull through. See, I grab the post, pull through, grab the post, pull through, grab the post, pull through. Okay, so that's my 2nd. Prep my double treble. Skip 1, go into the next. This is my 3rd. Skip 1, go into the next. This is my 4th. Skip 1, go into the next. This will be my 5th. Notice I'm not letting these stitches up here get too big either. I want to make sure they are nice and consistent. Skip 1, go into next. This is my 6th. Skip 1, go into the next. This is my 7th. Sorry of all the clinking of my stitch marker hitting the table here. Skip 1, go into the next. This will be my 8th, and that's how many I had counted. So I will pause for a second and just go back and count to make sure, because it's time saved actually. So I have all of my double trebles to begin with. This is the first one, and there's my skip stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then this is 8. So there's my double treble here. I'll skip one. And then this is my solitary standalone double treble right over here that doesn't have a skipped one on the next, as the next stitch. Okay, can you see how that's already starting to curve just like so? All right, now I'm back to where I have a group of double trebles all worked into one stitch. This is going to give us our increase again. This is going to give us sort of the hill of our chevron wave of the crochet shawl. So I prep my hook with my 3 yarn overs for my double treble, go into the next stitch over, and I'll place the first of what will become 5 double trebles. And if you methodically work them off of your hook just like I am, you will find that your double trebles will be nice and consistent and pretty. It does take a little bit of extra time. They aren't as quick to make as like a half double or a double, but as I mentioned before, you get a lot of height with them. So I'm going to confirm that's 4, so I've got one more to make. And all of these are going into that same stitch. All right, okay. We are now at the center of our shawl. So here's our marker, and as we work along, if you remember the designer note, it mentioned that they wanted us to move this center marker up throughout the entire shawl and placing it in that chain 2 section. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this marker out so that I can work into this stitch. And in this stitch, in this center stitch, I need to do a double treble, chain 2, and then another double treble into that same stitch. Whoops. Once that's done, I take this marker again and I'm just going to place it into that chain 2 space. So that lets me know this is my center space there, okay? So that's always the center of my shawl. That's really helpful because as you're working along, if for some reason all of a sudden your center point is over here, that's an indication that somewhere along this path you messed up. So it's really helpful to keep that center one centered. That's kind of funny. Okay, now I'm going to work the other half of this shawl, and we're essentially just going backwards, right? We both sides are just like the other. Would that be they mirror each other? They are symmetrical, and so as we pick up our work, we begin here with this next stitch right here. We will place 5 double trebles all into that one stitch. This will give us that nice center point that's coming out, that nice wave that happens. Gosh, this is such a pretty stitch. So that was 3. 4, and then there's 5. Okay, now I have to go through that series of 8 of my double trebles, skip one. And the first one, remember, it's right here next to that 5 double trebles. So we don't skip one to start. You place that double treble right next to the others in that next stitch over. So that's the first one. Skip a stitch. Go to the next one. This will be number 2. Skip a stitch. Go to the next one. skip a stitch, go to the next one, skip a stitch, go to the next one, skip a stitch, go to the next one. I'm gonna have to pause and count. I stopped counting, I just continued to just make. So I'm gonna pause here, I'm gonna count. So let's see here, there's my center. Here are my 5, and then here's 1, skip a stitch, 2, skip a stitch, 3, skip a stitch, 4, skip a stitch, 5, skip a stitch, 6, and skip a stitch, 7, skip a stitch, and then this will be number 8. And then we have to skip a stitch. So this here is my 1 solitary double treble. So skip a stitch right here, which brings us to the last stitch of this row. Okay, see how it's marked? See how it's right there? See how confusing it could be as you're looking here? You could be like, well, wait, I have 2. Do I have to put a stitch there? What do I do? So that marker really helps us out. It lets us know that the last series of stitches we're going to create, we put into that stitch right there that we have marked, okay? So we have to put how many double trebles there? 7. So I have to put 7 double trebles there. I'm going to take that marker out since I know where the stitch is and get them all placed there. I'm going to stop and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 1 more to create. So I have all 7 there. Let's go ahead and take a look at this little piece all spread out and see what yours should look like at this point as well. Oh boy, look how great this looks. It is getting this really nice curve. If yours is doing that, that's exactly what it's supposed to do. We've done all of our increases here, our series of decreases, a bunch of increases, decreases, and increases. That's giving us this nice wave. We have our center stitches marked right there, our center chains. We have our first stitch right down here. I should say it's marked from the first stitch of this row. It will be the last stitch we work into when we come back down, and we're ready to begin row 2. Row 2 and all even numbered rows are wrong side rows, and the majority of the stitches we will work on these wrong side rows are half double crochet front post stitches. These stitches are very easy to create, and we will go over those in a minute, but let's take a second, bring in that stitch diagram or the stitch chart, and take a look at the stitches as they're presented so that we can see what's happening. Okay, so I'm bringing in my stitch diagram again, and on this row we will be reading it from this number 2 right here all the way across into this direction. Now it's important to note that the half double crochet is represented by a T. There is no hash mark on it. So this T right here with that sort of like a funny looking C at the bottom, that funny looking C lets you know that that is supposed to be a front post stitch. So if you ever see that funny looking C that looks just like so, that lets you know that whatever the stitch is right up here, that is going to be worked into the front post. So looking down here at our second row, we can see we have 2 chains right here, and we know that that does not count as a stitch. But right here we have 1, 2, 3 regular double crochet, or I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3 regular half double crochets worked into that first stitch right there. So I'm going to put the number 3 there. Now it looks like I have a half double crochet post stitch worked literally into every single stitch all the way until I get to right here. Okay, so I'm just going to put a dot right there. I'm not even going to count those stitches at this point. There's just a stitch in every single one. So I will place the half double crochet front post into each stitch all the way down until I get to the first double treble of my center. Can you see that? There is a half double crochet front post worked around that double treble right there in the center. Okay, then I have 2 regular half double crochets worked into this chain 2 space. Then I have chain 2, and I have 2 more regular half double crochets worked into that chain 2 space. I'll at that point move my marker up to that chain 2 section. Then I can see I have a half double front post into all of the stitches until I get all the way back to the last stitch of the row, which is actually my chains, and I will put 3 half double crochets there. Okay, can you see that? So I will do 3 half double crochets and then a half double crochet front post in every stitch all the way to the last double treble here. And then I have 2 half doubles, chain 2, 2 half doubles, all into that chain 2 space. And then I would do a half double crochet post stitch all the way down till I get to my turning chain, where I will do 3 half double crochets. We can work on this together. This is actually a pretty easy row. So once I get started along this row, we're going to jump ahead so that we can see everything we're going to put in the middle, and then we'll jump ahead again to get to the end of the row. So we'll move through this one pretty quickly. Okay, here at the start, I am going to chain 2 and turn. And again, you can turn and chain 2. It doesn't really matter. I do want to remember to put this marker in, but I am not going to place it into this chain. Remember, these chain 2s do not count as a stitch. So I will put my marker in once I complete the very first half double crochet here. So I'm in the first stitch and I will work a half double. Now I'll take my marker and I'm going to put it into that V right behind that loop on my hook. Okay, so that's going to be the first stitch of my row, or the last stitch I work into on the next row. All right, so that was 1 half double. Remember, I have to do 3 of those into that first. So there's 2 and 3. Now, the rest of the way, we're going to do the half double crochet front post. And you know what? Just to make sure I'm saying it exactly as it is written in the pattern, I'm going to bring in the abbreviation part and read directly from that as I'm showing you how to do these stitches, just so that I'm saying exactly what is written in the pattern. So I'm going to set that there. And let's do our first half double crochet front post right here. So it says yarn over your hook and draw up a loop around the post of the next stitch at the front of the work. So here's the post of the next stitch. I'm going to go in from the right side, go around the back of that post, and come out the left side. If you're left-handed, it's the opposite direction. And then I'm going to yarn over my hook and bring that hook back that same path and come back. Okay, so I have 3 loops on my hook. All right, so now I have to yarn over and draw through all the loops on my hook. Okay, so I yarn over my hook, go to the next post stitch, going from right around the back and to the left, yarn over, take my hook around that same path and come back. So I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, draw through all 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over, going from the right side around the back, back to the front of the left side, yarn over, follow that same path back, 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, draw through all 3 loops. I'm going to continue doing this all the way down until I get to that marked center stitch. I am working around the last double treble before I got to my center marker. Remember, this is the point that I want to put actual half double crochets into this chain 2 space. So I will work 1 and 2 half doubles, chain 2, and then do 2 more half doubles all into that chain 2 space. There's 1 and 2. I'm going to take this marker and I'm going to place it around that chain 2 that I just created, and I'm going to carry on working my front post half double crochets all the way down. I know I'm to the white yarn against the white background. It's hard, but hopefully I will be through the white yarn by the time I get down here to the end. So let's continue on with our front post half double crochets around each stitch all the way to the end. Okay, so I'm to the last actual double treble. And so here are my initial chain 5s. Remember, I have that one marked. So into that last chain of my chain 5, that's where I want to do 3 half double crochets. So I'm going to take that marker out. It's easier to work into that chain with the marker not there. Okay, so I'm going to work into that chain and work 3 half doubles. And voila. So that completes my very first wrong side row. What do you say we flip this around and take a look at what our fabric looks like with that little lip that's created with those front post half double crochets? Oh man, so far this looks really cool. I love that I chose a yarn that is a long color changing striped yarn. That's what really gives a lot of impact to this particular pattern. So that's why using the Bernat Big Value Big Stripes will give a lot of punch, because not only do you get the color change as it appears here around the post, I don't know if you can see it, there's the white around the post, but then as it works along, you get the nice color change right above, working right here, and it just looks really good. You can see that little lip that's created, and we get a lot of texture and definition. Okay, now that we've worked through our very first wrong side row, the good news is most of all of the wrong side rows are just like this one, at least all the way through number 10. And then as you saw when we were reading through the pattern, many of the other rows that are also wrong side rows go back and mimic exactly what we just did. So that's the good news. A majority of your work, now you know exactly how to accomplish. Let's move on to row 3 and see what we need to do to get the next row completed of this shawl. Let's take a look at our stitch diagram once again, and let's count our stitches, because you can see here we are moving over our grouping of double trebles from right here at the start. They move over here just ever so slightly. So we begin a little bit differently. Okay, so you, once again, because I even forget this sometimes, you always want to start from the edge where you will begin reading the pattern from. Okay, so we've already counted here that we have 5. So I have 5 chains, and then I have 1, 2 double trebles worked into that stitch there. So I'm going to put the number 2. Then I have 1, 2, 3 double trebles worked into each of the next 3 stitches. So it's 1 there, 1 there, 1 there. So I'm just going to put 3 right there. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 worked into that 1 stitch. I'm going to put a 5. Now here is the pattern again. You can see here, this is where my decreases are. So I have my double treble, skip a stitch, double treble, skip a stitch. So that's my pattern repeat. So that I have that for 1, 2, let me do this again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so just like before, I have 8. We end with that skip a stitch. So then I have my one standalone double treble right there. So I'll do one. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into that one stitch. So I'll put 5. Then I have 1 into that one into that one, and 1 into that one. So I have 3. I'm going to put 3 there. And then here in my center, I have 2 double trebles, a chain 2, and 2 double trebles. So I'm not going to write anything right there because I know, you know what, I'm changing my mind. I'm going to write 2 and 2. And then I'll move my marker up. And now I'm coming back this direction. So I have 1, 2, 3 all worked into, let's see, 1, 2, 3 all worked into individual half double crochet front posts there. So I have 3. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all worked into that stitch there. Then I'm back to my pattern stitch. So I have a double treble, skip 1, double treble, skip 1, double treble, skip 1. And that will be for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because there's the last skip 1. We have our solitary double treble into that one stitch. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into that one stitch. Then I have 1 into that one, 1 into that one, 1 into that one. So there's 3. And I finish with 1, 2, 3 double trebles into the last stitch of the row. So I'm going to put the number 3 there. Okay, so I'm working double trebles the whole way. But now I know exactly how many stitches I have going. Does that help you? For those of you who like charts, but it does become a little bit more difficult to keep track where you are, especially when you have all of those stitches happening, I think this really is one of the best ways you could go about reading the chart. And then for those of you who still really like the words, you can even take the words and look at the chart and read through and add those numbers as well. It will help you reiterate what the words are telling you to do compared to what the chart is telling you to do. And hopefully you'll be able to bridge the gap of what you might have there as far as being able to transition and learn how to use the chart or the stitch diagram. All right, so now that I've prepped my chart for myself, I can grab my work and get started. So we're going to be working those double trebles all the way down this row again. Let's do that. I will begin with my chain 5, 3, 4, 5. Remember that chain 5 counts as a stitch. So I will grab my stitch marker and place it into that chain right behind the loop that's on my hook. Okay, and then I turn my work. I always turn my work after my chains. I just like it for some reason. And here I go. Now I know I have the white on here, but it's about to transition to a really pretty teal color, so this won't be here for very long. I'm going to prep my hook for double trebles. So I have 3 there on my hook. So now I'm going to place 2 double trebles right here into that stitch. So here is the first one. And here is the second one. Okay. And we continue. Now we have those 3 double trebles, and they will go into each one of the next 3 stitches. So we'll do 1 into the first one. One into the second. And 1 into the third. So that was my number 3 that I had placed on my chart. Now into the next stitch, I'm going to do 5 double trebles. Make sure I have 5 there. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this is my pattern stitch where I will do a double treble and then skip one, and I'll do that a total of 8 times. So I will yarn over my hook 3 times. Start with the first one right here as the one stitch over from where I just completed those double trebles. So that's the first one. Now I'll skip a stitch and go into the next one with a double treble. Skip a stitch, go into the next one. Skip a stitch, go into the next one. Skip a stitch, go into the next one. And I'm going to pause here for a second because you can see I have a knot coming up in my yarn. I do not want to crochet over that knot, so I'm going to take a second here. I'm going to cut that off, okay, so I leave a nice long tail, and I will remove that knot. And what I do is I will just take this yarn, and because it automatically just transitions with no problem, I'm just going to tie it onto this one, and I will untie that knot later, okay, that little tie there. But I like to have a tie there just to hold it in place. And here's where I will just continue on working with the yarn just as normal. So I yarn over 3 times, skip a stitch, go into the next. You do not want to crochet over those knots at all. I am not a big fan of magic, like the magic knot or anything. I don't like to use those. I just like to leave my tails, and then I do a very good job weaving in my tails later. And I will undo that knot right there. I will not leave that in place. How many times can you say knot in a series? Now I've completely lost count. All right, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 2 more. Skip one, go to the next. Skip one, go to the next. So that should be 8. I'm going to count one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Remember, we will skip one, and then we have our solitary double treble right there. Okay, now in the next stitch over, we will complete 5 double trebles, all into that same stitch. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's 5. So let me just make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. Now I want to do a double treble into the next 3 stitches. Is that 3? I'm going to confirm. Make sure I did that correctly here. So I have 1 into that one, 1 into that one, and 1 into that one. So that should be 3. Okay, let's do this. Let me see here. So I have 1, 2, this would be 3. Okay, here we go. So here's 1, 2, and 3. Now I have 2 that go into this space right here, so I will do 2 right here. So there's 1 and 2. Chain 2. Now I've got to put 2 more into that same space. That's my center section. There's 1 and 2. Okay, so here I am. I'm to the center of the shawl. Can move this up. I think this is the hardest part, is making sure that you get right on where you need to come to right there. So if you count all of these double crochets, you should have the same number as you have written down, right? You should have that same number. And now we're going to begin to work our way back along this row, okay? Okay, let's work down this side of the shawl together, and away we go. I start off with my double treble, and we will put 1 in each of the next 3. So let's make sure we get that going here. So here's 1. And here's 2. And 3. Now I have 5 double trebles that will go right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, see how that goes, a nice flow right there at the middle of the shawl. Now we continue on, and this is where we have our 8 sets of our double treble skip a stitch. So we get our yarn on our hook. Remember, we start off here right at the or the stitch right after our 5 double trebles. So there is our first one, and then skip a stitch, and then this is where we will do our second. Skip a stitch. Here's the next. Skip a stitch. Here's the next. Skip a stitch. Skip a stitch. I'm going to have to count. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Skip a stitch. Seven. Skip a stitch, and then here is 8. Okay, don't forget to skip a stitch and put 1 solitary double treble into that next one. Now we have 5 double trebles all into that one right there. So that's 4. There's 5. Now I have single double trebles, 1 into there, 1 into there, 1 into there. So that gives me my 3. So here's 1. And 2. And 3. Okay, it's the last stitch of my row, and this will be where I put the final 3 double trebles right there where that marker is. See how convenient that is having, see how convenient it is having that stitch marked there. It also is such a relief to be able to get down here and I'm at the right stitch count by the time I get to that last stitch. It's very easy to accidentally get off count right about the center point of the shawl. So be very careful at that point that you don't accidentally skip too many stitches or not skip a stitch there. Meaning, look, that's how that looks. And here's what I mean, but what I'm trying to say here is at this point, when I was doing these 3 double trebles right here, it's very easy to look at this and be like, oh my gosh, I only have 2 stitches. But remember that you have this, that's part of the stitch right there. Okay, so this post is that one, that post is that one, and that post is that one. So you have those 3. Then you have the two double trebles, chain 2, 2 double trebles. And then it's very easy to think, okay, well, I need to work into that stitch right there. But if you do that, you'll be 1 stitch off. So you have to work right here. Okay, does that make sense? If for some reason you do accidentally start at the wrong point, I know it's a pain in the rear, but the best thing you could do is rip back to where you made the mistake and start again. Because all of these rows stack on each other with the shaping, it's important we have the shaping begin and end where it's supposed to. So where normally I would say, just fudge it, this time you absolutely need to rip back and make sure everything is correct. That's why it's so important to make sure everything is on track, which is why I like the chart so much, because I can really break down very easily the number of stitches I have and where they need to go. Does that make sense? All right, let's take a look at what our work looks like at this point. Oh boy, this is really starting to take shape and it's so much fun to look at. Can you see all of that? Oh, I just love the big color changes. And again, you're probably able to see that sort of ridge right there a little bit better right now. So I have not turned my work yet. So this is the right side of the fabric. What I will do on the next row is turn my work over. And on this row, we will be working those half double crochet post stitches again, all the way back. But we do need to take a look at our chart to find out exactly when we do just plain half double crochets and when we do the front post half double crochets. So conveniently, this row 4 is just like row 2. So in the written instructions, it's written identically, but I do want to walk you through the chart a little bit for those of you who are attempting to do the chart with me. I want to make sure I'm not leaving you hanging. So let's look at that chart. I really hope you guys are finding this as helpful as I do. I think it's so convenient. All right, once again, we want to make sure we're starting over here where our number 4 is, because that's the direction we will begin to read this chart. I have a chain 2 there, but it doesn't count as a stitch, so I'm not going to really worry about that. But I do want to count how many half double crochets I have working into that first stitch there. And I can see I have 1, 2, 3, so I can put the number 3. Then it looks like I have a half double crochet front post into every stitch, all of the stitches we just created, once again, all the way down right here to the very last front post, to the very last double treble. And then we have 2 half doubles, chain 2, 2 half doubles into that chain 2 space. Then working into or around the post of all of those double trebles, we're doing half double crochet front post. Again, all the way down here to the very end. This is our turning chain 5 that we have marked and we will put 3 half double crochets there. Pretty simple stuff. I know you know how to do this row already because you've already done it with row 2. So I'm gonna get started on this row and then I'm going to let you finish yours and we will jump up to row 5. All right, okay, let's get started. So let's move the diagram out of the way and bring our work in. I have my marker here so I can add it once I complete that first stitch. So I will chain 2, does not count as a stitch, turn my work, and then I will place 3 half double crochet into that first stitch. After the first one, I pause, take my marker and put it into that V. You see it? Once again, it's the V right behind my hook. Okay, so there's 1, 2, and 3. This row seems to go so fast because I don't have to do all those double trebles. So now I'm going to work my front post half double crochets all the way to that stitch right there. It's the very last stitch before I do those chain 2s. So each one of these is going to get the front post half double. Again, I'm going around the post of the stitch. So I'm going around the post, yarn over, bring it back up, and work a half double. This row will begin to work up really fast for you as you're going along because you take so long on those right side rows with all those double trebles. These rows seem like they just take no time. We don't have to work any increases. We're simply just creating this nice half double crochet front post so that we get that nice lip on the right side of the fabric. Such a cool texture design feature. And this is the last double treble. All right, so this is where things change just ever so slightly. I will do 2 half doubles into this chain 2 space. So there's 1 and there's 2. Chain 2. I can go ahead and take that marker out and then put 2 half doubles into that same chain 2 space. There's 1 and 2. Okay. I want to give you a little tip here. You know how we're supposed to put this marker into this chain 2 space? One thing you could do if you're having trouble on your right side rows, if you're having trouble finding the last stitch before these chain 2s, what you could do is I'm going to rip back to this part right here. Okay, so this is as if I just finished 2 half doubles. I'm going to chain 2, so chain 1, chain 2. And then when I complete the first half double here of the second set, I am going to take my marker and I'm going to place it into the top of that stitch, so into the V. And that's going to give me 2 things here. It's telling me that this is the center of my shawl, but it's also telling me that as I'm working up this row here, as I'm working this direction, and I'm to the part where I need to do stitches all the way up to where I get to this chain 2 part, I know that that's where my very last of the stitches will go. Does that make sense? So if I bring in my chart here and we look at the previous row that we did, so row 3, as we were working all the way this way to row 3 and we had to do those set of just the 3 single or the 3 solitary double trebles, 1, 2, 3. If you had trouble finding that last one, you were like, wait a minute, I don't have a stitch there. That last stitch right there before you get to these 2 chains, that's what I've just marked. Can you see that? So I've marked that stitch, so now you know where it is, and you also know that those are the chain 2s. Can you see that? See how that helps? I think that will help a lot of people out. All right, so then you got to make sure you complete that second half double, okay? And now we are back to our half double front post. This will help you out immensely. I think I should have mentioned that on the first one, but I didn't even think about doing that until now. And I know that even for myself, that helps so much to know where that stitch is, where the last stitch I need to work into. I love stitch markers. Those of you who follow along with me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel know I love stitch markers. They are there as very useful tools for us to know where stitches need to go, where a row ends. They're just great. And I'm coming up here. You'll notice that I did not mention crocheting over your tails. And that's because I am not a fan of that. I think it is better off to take the time to weave in your ends. So I am not going to crochet over my tails here. I'm just going to leave them out there. And when all the project is done and I have all the other balls of yarn to add in, I have those tails ready to go, I will take the time and I will bury my ends using a chenille needle. I find them very helpful, or even a big eye yarn needle. They're really great. See how fast this row goes? This just zooms on through. Zoom, zoom, zoom. And almost back. It's to the last double treble. Remember, we're going to finish everything with those 3 half doubles into that last chain of the chain 5 turning chain from the previous row. And so this is my last double treble. Here's my chain 5 turning chain, okay? Just like before, so I have that chain right there, okay? I'll be working into that chain. So I put 3 half doubles, well, maybe. So there's, pulled up a stitch, yarn over, pull through 1. Here's 2, and here is 3. Okay, pretty good. It's an easy way to finish that off. And it doesn't look like much on this side, right? But when we flip it over, we get that nice lip. Why don't we take a second and look at the right side of this fabric, because it's starting to look really cool. Oh boy, I am in love with the way this looks. Again, with the long color changing yarn here, you are getting a lot of bang for your buck, because we see all of these colors on one row, but then as they transition from one to the next and then to the next on the following row, you get to see peekaboos of the color around those post stitches. You get this really cool lip of the fabric happening, and this is just fantastic. This is so beautiful. You know, if you didn't want to make a full shawl, you could end this a little bit early and have sort of like a cowl. You could put buttons at these points and button it around your neck like a cowl. There's all sorts of fun things you could do. All right, so I promised you that I would walk through row number 5 with you. So let's go ahead, grab our stitch chart, our stitch diagram, take a look at the numbers we need to work, and then get cruising on those double trebles. Well, how are you guys doing so far? We are an hour into this video and we have just now gotten to row 5. I think this is a really good stopping point to transition to a brand new video. So if you would like to continue on with the instructions, and trust me, there's a lot more to learn here, make sure you carry on over to part 2 of 2 for the Bernat Lacy Crochet Shawl. Thanks guys, see you there. Thanks so much for joining me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe. I've put a link right over there, or you can watch a couple of the videos I've already selected for you right down there. If you want to follow me on social media, I've put my links right over there. You could have all Marley all the time. Bye guys.